Welcome to another episode of God Yay or Nay. Today I'm here with Jillian Kowalchuk. Jillian's here from London. Jillian, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually calling in from Glasgow at the moment, but usually based in London.
Oh, Glasgow, what are you doing there?
Just closer to my partner's family. Just
Oh,
Scotland seems to be doing a pretty good job at handling COVID, so
yeah, all right, that's
also
pretty
another
nice.
factor.
Go up north to Scotland. Nothing wrong with that. So thanks for joining me, Jill. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your app because this is such a cool thing that you did. It's called Safe in the City. Do you want to maybe give a little background on what the app is and maybe how you kind of it came to be?
Yeah, definitely. As we've known each other for many years, so you've seen probably a few paths that I've taken and a lot of navigating different countries and jobs and things like that. But ended up landing in London to do my master's degree in public health. And as a newcomer, when I kind of permanently resettled over here, I was using navigation apps to move around the city. And found that I was more or less being moved like a car into different places like car parks or alleyways that I didn't necessarily feel comfortable. So I started to recognize there was this kind of, sorry, there, can you hear the construction or no?
The very tiny bit, so I think you're good.
Okay, should we, okay, sorry. I'll start from the um, so I started to recognize that the technology wasn't necessarily it didn't feel like it was keeping me in mind. It was just kind of treating me like everyone has one set path. And I think specifically as a woman in a new city, a new country, that factor into my personal safety. And after one particular incident, I felt like that was definitely the light bulb moment as I was kind of observing these oddities around the technology I was using. Um, I was following a route which took me the fastest way, which happened to cut through an alleyway to meet a friend, and it was empty, but I felt like, oh, I don't really want to go down this dark, dingy alleyway, but I'm late. I don't want to be like, there's no one there. I should just take it, kind of self-talking myself out of the situation. And then ended up taking the route. And unfortunately, these kitchen staff came out on a smoke break and felt like it was something that they probably did on a regular basis just because of how fast it escalated. But essentially, they blocked my route. They were talking about how they could sexually assault me, and there's really nothing I could do about it. And I was ready to kind of like, okay, I think they're bluffing, but I will fight them, like if that's what's gonna happen here. And luckily, nothing transpired. I let me pass, but the experience was quite upsetting to say the least.
Mhm.
And there was a couple of things that I even recognized in my own self that had happened in the past. So I didn't know where I could report something like this because I'm like, okay, well, what are the police going to do? Be like, did they touch you? Did they, sexually assault you? And I'd be like, no, but they threatened, and they'd be like, okay, that's like you're wasting our time. Like that's kind of what it felt like.
Mhm.
Uh, going into the business and doing that when I was already late to meet a friend, like also felt like, oh my God, like why do I have to take out such a weight of responsibility over something that shouldn't have happened in the first place? So then kind of, backtracking from that, I started to look at, the app itself being something that we could build on so that, when people are walking, they do have safety information that's able to be given to them on the go in different places. You could get help in an emergency, of course, like through any application, as well as you could report things like this that happen on a very regular occurrence that aren't captured in any kind of official data set for the most part. And then how can we build the technology to actually help facilitate keeping people safe, but also contributing those experiences to the design of smarter, safer, more inclusive spaces.
That is, yeah, that's such an amazing story. Yeah, sorry that happened to you too. That sounds like pretty traumatic stuff. But yeah, like this is such a like just an amazing way how you like brought this on and like so like this app now it's up and running in London. Is that the only city at the moment?
So it's London and Berlin. And we're also looking at how we can scale that. And we have a crowdfunding campaign that will be live on the 28th. So stay tuned because there's some interesting information that we'll be sharing about how we're trying to roll out to more cities. But yeah, currently in a couple of places, and that's intentional. Not that the technology can't be scaled to any location, but what has been successful with Safe in the City and maybe is drawing a little bit from more of my experience in a public kind of public health or a public organization kind of background is that really what's important is not just the tech to keep people safe, but then what do we do with that information? Like, how can we actually apply it and measure, an impact in that area? So that's really kind of front and center and quite unique about what Safe in the City is doing.
Yeah, and that is very unique. One thing I've noticed, like especially about data, and like you won like an award for like top 20 woman in data in the UK. So this is like such a initiative that you're taking that I really love. Like, because I don't know, sometimes I see with a lot of data companies right now, like they kind of use their data just mostly for selling stuff or just mostly for their own advantage and which it's understandable living in our kind of society, but like what you're doing here is like, hey, like we can use data for so many other things and like you're actually doing it for public safety. And it seems like this is like a system that learns because the more people that get onto this app, safe in the city, like the more people, like the more the actual data and stuff just keeps accumulating and learning, and then you get better routes and it just gets better and better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head in saying that, we see, and I think there's a lot of like next generation kind of businesses that really intertwine kind of impact like social value plus, profit. So, at the end of the day, whether it's, the environment or, damaging behavior like hate crimes or microaggressions, like they all do actually have a cost, in a kind of economic sense. So what we're trying to do is actually show the impacts of what is happening and also how we can, incorporate that into our technologies so that it doesn't become kind of, you know, a one approach here, one approach here that's all kind of disconnected that we can't really make sense out of it. So one of the things that Safe in the City is building is actually the APIs and the integration, so we can actually fit our technology into other apps. So if it's a dating app, if it's another like if it's a running, marathon training app, or an Uber, it becomes something that you always have access to report discriminating, hate, and types of harassment, as well as your right to safety in those spaces. If there is a terrorist threat or if there is like an emergency, you should be alerted. It shouldn't be on everyone to check Twitter to see what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing. And like, I remember like when I visited you back in London, maybe I don't know if it was like 5 years ago, maybe six. I can't even remember, but yeah, this
Yeah,
was like right
at the
when you were
start.
kind of starting this whole journey, and like it's just amazing to see like how far you've come along. And yeah, hey, I used like the apps there for the tube. That's like their kind of their transit and in London, and like I can completely understand because I was doing shows all around the city. It's such a huge city, so many different places, so many different streets to take, so many trains to like jump off and on. So like I remember like a lot of times like you just jump off in a completely different neighborhood to go find a show, and it just takes you through these like it takes you to sometimes to some
Yeah,
scary places and you're like, geez, like what am I doing here? So like yeah, for
exactly.
a city
Yeah.
like London, like this app just is amazing. And like I'm living in Toronto right now, I can see this like working so well over here as well.
Oh yeah, we'd love to get to Canada, of course. That's home country. And yeah,
Yeah,
where
and
I could
actually,
take them.
that's a good point. Like, you say, like Canada's your home country too, but you're also your home country's Yemen as well. Like, that's you kind of grew up in Yemen, am I right?
Yeah, and actually, I received a really nice message from a Yemeni man who said, if you've lived in Yemen, then you are like Yemen is your country, and I was really like touched by kind of the sentiments around that.
Aw.
But yeah, you're right. I did move in the early 90s to Yemen with my family for oil and gas at the time, my father's work. And yeah, it was really interesting experience. It's definitely shaped who I am today, and being kind of an expat child in, a very, almost polar opposite, in terms of temperature, in terms of poverty, in terms of human rights or women's rights, even for that matter. There was so much I learned at such a young age about, culture and, people. And I think, seeing it from probably a child lens too, you see a lot more similarities. Like, you don't see like, oh, that person's, different. You see their different color, but or they wear different clothes, or, they practice a certain religion, but you're not necessarily thinking that's odd, or, you're just kind of accepting and soaking everything in.
Of
So I
course.
think that was really helpful to me, and did definitely set my track on kind of a number of other countries that I'd lived in, and traveled throughout. So yeah, even I guess from that stance, from with Safe in the City, like, it's something that I have an ambition to get into developing countries, that, this could also be a very disruptive, way for people at all levels to be able to, report and share these things. Of course, not everyone has a smartphone. We do have a web, site for that, but, I think there's a lot more power to the people coming up, and I think technology is the way to enable that.
Oh, 100%. So coming from Yemen, and then like you also came from like so a medical, like you went into tropical medicine when you first went moved to the UK. So like that's such an interesting transition, like going from that into like the tech world. Can you like maybe give us a little like idea of like how you make these transitions in your life that are just seem so huge, like, and like this is one thing I love of like this podcast we love talking about is like when somebody makes that change in their life when when they feel they just need to, like, can you give us a little like insight into like how you made that change?
Yeah, it definitely changes, depending on what age bracket we kind of look at. It was a lot less criteria, in the early 20s, to probably now, but I definitely had, a lot of, I guess, disruption in my personal life, including my family, and losing my mom and father. So that kind of, in a way, gave me kind of a sense of, I can do whatever I want. Like, if I can, survive this, I can probably survive anything. And
Yeah.
that originally took me to New Zealand and then Australia, and I did try a number of different jobs along the way, via Japan, back to Australia, to Uganda, to the UK, back to Canada. So yeah, I think it's been a really good experience, and a lot of the times I feel that there's just this kind of understanding that maybe, like, something's kind of time is running up in terms of like a place. Like, I felt it in New Zealand. Like, I was happy, I was content, I was comfortable. And I think I definitely had this urge that I'm like, I don't necessarily want to be comfortable. I want to kind of keep pushing and growing myself. And there's so much more for me to do. Why would I move to the other side of the world to kind of just settle down into like a small city? I definitely wanted to kind of soak in as much of life as I could, and kind of going back to probably that understanding that life is fragile and you never know how much time you have, and that type of thing. But moving to the UK, I was actually a little bit settled in Vancouver when I did make that decision, but was very keen on, unfortunately leaving Canada because I, thought there was a lot more global opportunities in the UK. Unfortunately landed like a few days after Brexit referendum, which I just didn't think was going to happen.
Ha 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 ha.
I also seem to have these like natural disasters. That's another episode probably. Um, but yeah, I knew that I always wanted to help people. That started my psych degree when we met, and then kind of moved from kind of helping individuals to like how can I help a lot of people at once. And I probably through that travel and experience created that desire to do more. Um, and yeah, I settled on it was actually one of my best friends who had completed her public health master's from the London School of Hygiene Tropical Medicine. She's like, you are a public health professional. Like, this is just kind of the culture and the way that people see and interconnect things. And at the heart of it, really care about people, their well being, their health, their longevity. So yeah, I came over and I got in. Like, it's one of the top schools in the world. It actually is the originator of public health, the study of public health. So I was, yeah, very drawn into it. And yeah, that's kind of what landed me in London.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting. And then like when you like when this event happened to you in London that made you like think of this whole safe in the city thing, like how did that idea start like kind of growing and like was it like making that jump then from like public health into tech? Like isn't that two completely different worlds? Like how did this like end up like unraveling?
Yeah, I think they are and they aren't. It becomes something that I think there was a lot of interest. I had a lot of interest even during my master's in how technology could support different healthcare treatments and people support. So even I moved to Uganda while I was awaiting my master's thesis results for a few months and worked at an HIV hospital and was specifically working with young people who were essentially graduating from kind of adolescent into young people or adult care. And they, like everyone here, like they're on their phones and all of these archaic ways that getting people to go here and there instead of being like, why can't we just meet them where they're at? Like, why can't they seek advice on their phones? Or like what are some of these barriers? And I found that it was a lot more of these probably technophobes, just like, I don't understand it, so therefore like let's not explore it, versus this is a practical like solution that could actually help a lot more people and move to the times. So there was always an interest in how technology could be applied to public health. But as you said, like jumping into tech was also nuts. And, my family, my siblings were like, what, you just want to be professionally broke, like traveling the world and doing all these degrees? Like, what are you doing now, starting a company in one of the most expensive places in the world, not knowing anyone or having a background? But for me, it was very much centered on, it wasn't just my experience and it wasn't, I'd had that lived experience, which I think was a bit of a missing piece for me. And, some of the work I was doing in Uganda or around HIV, it was like, this isn't my personal experience. So as much as I can get behind and support people, I think, it becomes an even deeper rooted passion when it's something that's affected your life, and you can create change. Oh,
No,
sorry.
that's 100% true, and I love how you said that. Like you found something that like really resonated with you and affected you, and that I think that almost like kind of provides a motivation to just keep going when you have this idea brewing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, coming from kind of like I was in actually academia, I was working at UCL as a researcher, and so just even diving into kind of the research that I was certainly not the only one, and this was kind of around the age of Me Too. So it was just this explosion of people kind of sharing these sexual assault and harassment and, you know, intersectional kind of hate crimes that are coming up. Like, and it was quite overwhelming. I was like, okay, this is a sign. Like, I need to do something here. Almost everyone I've talked to about this, you know, was like, this, I can't believe this doesn't exist. And I think it was through that it just continued to build this momentum for me, as well as these, you know, probably a little bit of naivety, but also, you know, that there was just so many doors open. There were so many people willing to help me, that I was like, okay, I have to do this. So I set a pretty aggressive roadmap to leave my job. I think it was within 3 months. Luckily, did get into like an accelerator, which came with a grant, so it could help me build the product. And then had a whole like, you know, push also to make sure that I could get my visa to stay over here, which, you know, kind of had to, you know, was leveraged on the success of this product launching. So yeah, there was a lot on the line, which kind of helped commit me. But, you know, ever since, it's just continued to like open up doors that I didn't know were possible.
Yeah, and that's like a yeah, I like that. Open up doors you didn't know that was possible. I think that's one thing like I've noticed with people when they make these transitions in life. Like one thing they make that tradition a transition because it does affect them something that like is they're passionate about it that affects them emotionally. Like that they're like okay, like this is something I need to like actually do, and like that gives you that intrinsic like motivation to keep going. And yeah, and then like once those new doors start opening, then it's just like it's just that snowball effect, and like then you just like are you become like oh my god, like I can't believe like which direction now my life is going because it can take you anywhere, and that's like I don't know, it's the beauty of life and the beauty of these kind of things, right?
Exactly. You can change it, you know, at any moment. And I think the more we kind of grow up and listen to the other people kind of taking us away from that drive and that purpose, then the more confused and, you know, unsettled we still feel versus kind of just diving right in.
So like you do like kind of like life coach or business coach for a lot of people as well. Like this is something that you help a lot of people out with, which I can understand given your story. So like when you're like with the kind of people that you have worked with, what are like some of the common like problems you see people like having like that you run into a lot?
Yeah, well, one of the things that, you know, in the entrepreneur community, it is very collaborative in that a lot of people are kind of giving their time and helping each other. But I found that, you know, a 15-minute conversation or, you know, let's catch up after a networking event just wasn't really an effective way to really deep dive into some of these issues. And again, with my kind of like psychology hat on, I was always very much like, how can I help people believe in themselves? Because it felt like there was a lot of people, you know, coming to me at different events and being like, I can't believe you've done this. And, you know, I'm like, but you can do it too. Like there's no barriers here. You know, I'm not special. You know, it's just maybe that mindset. So I think one of the things that I wanted to do, and I think, you know, as a CEO, obviously I'm managing a team, but being a coach to, you know, another, I do a lot with female founders at startups or minority founders, which I'm really passionate about, and hope one day that I can be an investor in these types of companies. But I found that, you know, there is a lot of more kind of personal things underlying, you know, the business problems. You know, whether it's not being comfortable with asking for money, or, you know, not feeling confident to kind of give that pitch. I feel like a lot of it is still rooted in these, you know, fundamental things that we all share of, you know, imposter syndrome and, you know, not wanting to fail and, you know, these types of things. So
What
that's something I definitely found.
okay, what is imposter syndrome? I've never heard that term before.
Oh, right. So it's more or less, I guess, feeling like you don't belong there. Like, you know, you found this, maybe you're in this big pitch and, you have, or you're pitching to VCs and they're going to give you 500,000 and you're just like, I don't deserve this. Like, I shouldn't be here. Like, am I really good enough? It's just this kind of negative self-talk that you give yourself that makes you feel like, you're a poser, you're not really deserving of kind of the success or what you've established and where you're at.
Yeah. Okay. I like. Yeah. I can relate to that a lot. I think everybody can. Like, that's. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
something like we all like have trouble with, and I like how you were kind of talking about like just being open to like asking for stuff or being open to talking with people like in a real way, and like from the comedy world, I know this is something like we face, and I think everybody in every kind of world does. Like, I think when it comes to like finding success or finding that forward momentum in life, like you need to be vulnerable. Like you need to be able to like um you need to be able to shut your mind off in the sense that like, hey, let me ask this person for help, or let me ask this person for something that I need. And like you'll be surprised when a lot of times you'll just get that thing that you need right away, and then that's where that forward momentum starts happening and you can like actually start moving forward.
Exactly. And when you can open up and be vulnerable, and I think, because Safe in the City has been so, focused in a lot of like introduction to what Safe in the City is, that vulnerability really helps people see like, hey, that's like my story, or, you know, I've always wanted to do something like that. Like it connects us better when we actually can just get to the raw truth of, who we are and what we're trying to achieve and how we can
Hmm.
help each other.
Yeah, and like connecting that to that raw truth of like who you are, like that's how like you resonate with other people. I used to do this writing exercise that actually kind of like almost like down the road it like I kind of see how that kind of turned into this podcast, but like the writing exercise that used to do this thing where like we take notables, and like the whole thing about taking a notable is like whenever you have like a strong emotional reaction to anything, like make sure you write that down in your journal and keep that in mind. And
Mm,
like when I started doing this for like months and months, I started noticing all these connections of like, oh, this is what naturally makes me like naturally drives emotion in me, and like it had to do with like self-development, it had to do with meditation and like psychedelics and getting to know yourself. Like these are the things, and like that's kind of how it like transpired into this kind of thing. But yeah,
amazing.
yeah, like so like that's a really cool thing like how you say, because like I can tell like you're talking about something that affected you and that's like really deep into you, and now people resonate with that, and like that's how these ideas start to like take off and grow.
Yeah, no, exactly. I really like that exercise though. And, again, it's also just like these small micro steps. Like you didn't know that starting that exercise would get you to this podcast, but even just taking that step and going through that process and appreciating and learning from that journey is what it's all about. Like there's no end, ranking at the end of our lives. Like money is gone, people are gone, your legacy lives on. And I think the more that you live your truth, and follow that journey as best you can, then you're on a good track.
Mm-hmm. No, that's oh, that's cool. So let's like talk a little bit like, so when you cut ties to like a certain part of your life and you move on to something different, like what are the feelings that come up during that time, and like how do you like convince yourself? I don't know if convince is the right word, but like this is the right decision you're making, and then like make sure those fears and doubts and all that stuff, like how do you deal with those?
Mm, that's a really good question. I think it is kind of connecting to yourself. Like, I think you mentioned meditation. I think that's been so critical to me, in making some big decisions. But there always seemed to kind of feel like, and it usually would take kind of months for this kind of feeling to be like, I don't know if I should be here anymore. And I'd start to probably see signs that would reinforce that kind of thought process. And then start to look for kind of, I guess, opportunities or, things that were coming up that I wasn't maybe as open to explore. So, for example, in Australia, I was, you know, working in hospitality. I was actually trying to build a makeup business, which I was doing freelance. And it happened to be in fashion, and I was like, oh, like there was just a lot of things that I didn't really like about that particular area. I was very like more special effects, and but the doors weren't opening in that, and this was getting really toxic for me while I was also working my butt off. And so that kind of just started to signal like, okay, like this, I don't feel like this is like a long-term plan. And of course the visa was kind of coming up to make another kind of decision, like do I kind of work hard to stay here, or do I kind of just jet off? And then weirdly enough, I think I was talking to my brother about it, and he was like, I think a few years before me, he had taught in Japan. He's like, I could probably get you a job in Japan if that's of interest. And I was like, yeah, why not? And then within, I think, 2 or 3 days, I'd gotten a job in Japan. I started learning Japanese, and I booked my flight. And I think within a few weeks, I was on a plane there.
Ha, ha.
So I don't recommend that to everyone. I think, I mean, if you're definitely traveling, that the visa situation helps you kind of navigate those choices because it's quite a big investment. Went through it in the UK to, go through kind of a longer term settlement. So yeah, I think probably a combination of those, but just knowing that I hadn't found kind of what really drove me. And I've always been kind of that type of person who wasn't just kind of after a certain salary or a certain status of career. I was always like, I want to help people, but I do want to be successful. I do want to have a legacy, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I'm proud that I continue to, be a bit of a Jill of all trades to wait till I found something. And now I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so an entrepreneur, but it wasn't a buzzword, or I didn't have any exposure to that. So
Yeah, and it's kind of like almost you're like searching around and you're going to different places, like almost experimenting with different lifestyles and stuff that kind of like ended up like finding you being able to hone in on what you actually like are, right?
yeah, exactly. And you don't know until you try. Like there's so many, people who are like, oh, I wish I tried that. And I'm like, why don't you just try that? And especially when you're young, like there's so much means to kind of move around and try different things. So I really encourage more people to do that. You'll find the answers as you go through it.
Oh, hell yeah. No, I love that. All right. So like you did mention meditation. I love that. So like I don't know, besides meditation, like how many other like stuff that like do you do to kind of like take care of yourself? Because like I notice you have like a very very busy schedule and you're constantly doing like different events and different kind of things. So like how do you keep yourself like level, and like what kind of like self-care, or like is self-care important to you?
Definitely. Whenever self-care is gone out the window, then, a lot more kind of crap comes.
Yeah, no.
And I think that because you're not centered in yourself, you're not making good decisions, you're not taking care of your body, you're not thinking straight. It all really comes down to that practice and that discipline. And I've always had a very, interest in this. I remember going to, I think I started Tai Chi when I was 10 years old. Like I've always been this like little hippie,
Ha ha ha.
yeah, young person. So I think I started an environmental club at 7. I was just always like very drawn to this like, how can I fix like, or how can I work towards these bigger kind of issues and goals. But obviously that does take on a lot of stress. So you have to like re-center yourself to be like, how do I become a better person to like stack on all this like, horrible things that I'm trying to work through. And yeah, so for me, like getting up pretty early really helps. Like I've extended that now with COVID. It used to be 5:30, now it's 6.
Ha ha ha.
So I have a pretty good like routine. I do meditate, before and after I go to sleep, or when I wake up, and then Yeah, usually I do some journaling. I try to read for half an hour. I do some exercise. I have lemon juice and water
Ha, ha,
to
ha,
just
ha, ha, ha.
kickstart the digestive system. And I do go through different kind of mantras and priming to just be really center in really gratitude of like where I am and what I've already accomplished. And what I want to achieve in the day. I'm a pretty routine goal setter. I feel like I could probably pull this off the wall if
Oh,
anyone's
nice.
seeing this. Yeah, so again, just I think the more that you can measure these measure the things that you want to work on, then the better you're actually attuned and focused on that. So yeah, I do try to focus on growing my mind, like trying different things that expand my horizons, doing something to challenge my body, and then kind of nurturing my spirit. So
Hey, yeah,
yeah,
that
if
seems like
anyone wants that template, let me know.
yeah. Well, I was like that. Like, so you just pulled down for the people who are listening. You pulled down like a little goal setting sheet you have. You want to actually kind of run like, because I did actually. I was talking to a few people who listen to my podcast, and they were saying like, oh yeah, like I heard a few of your guests talking about setting goals and like thinking of the future, and it really got me thinking about it. So like, yeah, you want to kind of like give a little idea to like how you set goals and like how you recommend other people to do it and like how like what do you do to actually achieve those goals once you set them?
Yeah, and I don't feel like I've mastered it. There's definitely, periods in my life where I feel like I probably don't set enough goals or ones that I probably set too many. And I think there's also a really keen, like really important quote. I think it's from Bill Clinton that we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10. So I think for me, you know, focusing on more short-term goals with this kind of larger vision is helpful. So I do actually do there's a 10-year kind of plan where you're writing out like your ideal day 10 years down the line. And I think that is also a really good exercise to almost like project yourself in the future, but also project yourself in the past so you can actually see the breadth of what life is possible for you. Um, so I do kind of more, yeah, like creative stuff around like the much larger vision and goals. And then these are kind of more, micro goals where I know that for me, I'm, building out my coaching stuff at the same time. So I have a number of different things that I want to get accomplished, but I also, want to kind of continue to stack like, how do I just keep nudging the edge on taking a better care of my body? Like I've cut coffee, I don't drink anymore. So the more that these like micro habits you can kind of start stacking, I think the more that you can actually reach those goals without setting them so out of scope or unachievable. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that helps, but I'm happy to send my weekly. I put it together myself. I don't
Oh,
know
so
if
it's like a
that's a
little
free
weekly kind
resource.
of what you want to accomplish this week kind of thing.
Yeah, but again, kind of focus on. So I have three goals under grow your mind, expand your horizons. There's 3 points, challenge your body, and then nurture your spirit. And then I have like a little section where I just evaluate my goals from last week. And then I also have just started an up next because I'm my mind is so like, oh, I want to do this, but I'm like, okay, I need to focus. Like I need to just like not pile up my list, just like make it incremental.
Yeah, that's actually a really good piece of advice too for people who are trying to do goals and stuff. Is like you got to make it incremental and like make those small changes. And like once you make those
Mhm.
changes and turn it into a habit, they become so easy. And then there, it's almost just like completely automatic. And like that's kind of how you want to do it. If you like make your like vision in the future and you try to do too much right away, you just end up failing because you're setting yourself up for it. And then when you fail, like that just gives doubt and all that shame, all those guilt, all that stuff starts coming up, and then you just get into this like negative feedback loop. So I like what you're
Yeah.
doing. Take those incremental steps, evaluate what you did in the last week, and see like okay, and like you said, you prioritize like the stuff that you want. Like you prioritize growing your mind, prioritize challenging your body, you prioritize your spirit. Like these are kind of well, these are foundations for most people, and like these are probably stuff that most people should be prioritizing. And when you make those kind of goals that you can actually set with that, it's like yeah, it's
Mhm.
amazing like when how much you can do, and it's amazing how easy these things start getting when you make them into habits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great book called Atomic Habits that I highly recommend about those again. Like it does go into goal setting, but just making them almost that, as you said, like a positive reinforcement. They're just like so silly that you're like, of course I'm gonna, make it once a month to the gym. But then, that process of you being able to be like, great, like I'm building self-confidence in the process of like staying true to my word and seeing that it's working, that really helps, I think continue that process of using goals as strategies to kind of get you to where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I gotta ask you the question because this is the name of the podcast. So, Jillian Kowalchuk, God yay or nay?
Agnostic?
Agnostic in the middle. All
Did I
right.
go in the middle?
Yeah, of course you can. So yeah, I just want to kind of know, like, do you have like, because I think you do have a little bit of that spiritual side to you. So like, kind of, do you think of those kind of greater questions a lot, maybe? Like, why are we here and all that kind of stuff, or how does that work?
Yeah, of course. Like those are the best kind of conversations with people. Yeah, I think, I grew up fairly liberal Christian family, like, and of course we went intermittently throughout, like Yemen, there wasn't a church, and it was United, the Church of United Church. I can't even remember, but
Mm-hmm.
it was one of the most like liberal in that we had gay ministers and marriages and things like that. So that was, what I think I really appreciated as a, I think I was under 13 when I was like, uh, but what I did appreciate was almost this kind of lecture style and storytelling of morality and choices. And I liked that aspect. And I do think that it serves different people. But for me, um, yeah, I think it was around maybe 13, 14 where I started to not really, I started to kind of question a lot around religion and yeah, like why a lot of why questions that just couldn't ever be answered. Um, and then I think I did go through university, my first university degree, like more in terms of reading a lot of Dawkins and being very like, no, I'm definitely atheist. Like, there's just no way. There's gotta be like, a
I,
logical explanation for all of this.
I think that was my first thing when I went into school. That was like pretty much exactly what I did. Got into Dawkins and Hitchens, and I was like, yep, big atheist right here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But then I think over the last, I don't even know, maybe 5 years, like it feels relatively recent that I started to be like, what is the, why do I need a definite? Why am I clinging to definite? Like, why can't I be comfortable with just not knowing and accepting that? And taking, principles from different doctrines. Like, I really gain a lot from like Buddhist practice, but I don't think I would call myself a Buddhist. There are elements to Christianity, and I did go to like a Catholic high school, so lived in a Muslim country. Like I have been exposed to many cultures and religions, and I think all of them, often center around very similar points, which I think are helpful to have. But I also, you know, think that there can be very damaging things that come from it. I mean, clearly war and things that are still going on to this day. Um, so yeah, I think balancing in this kind of agnostic realm leads me to be curious and open more than kind of closed and maybe a bit defensive. at either side. And yeah,
100%.
that's, I think, probably a philosophy I take on. One of the other things people can follow me on is called veg gnostic. And it's about being a lot more agnostic to being vegan and vegetarian, because again, there's not an ultimate truth to being, making ethical choices about food or the environment, or, whatever you, sustainability. So, I think the more that we can be open to these types of really important questions, the more we're actually open to learn and share and connect.
Yeah, hey, that's awesome. I love that answer. Yeah, you know what? Like, I'm actually like my new comedy bit. Like, I'm really working on. It's on like it's a defensive agnostic. So, like, I do definitely kind of consider myself in that vein as well. And I love how you said it keeps you more open and curious, and more rather than closed, right? And honestly, closed and rigid, and like that's closed and rigid is probably the mindset that pretty much takes you nowhere. It'll like sometimes it can get you a spot in a like maybe in some sort of workplace or whatever, and you're thinking, oh, it's me being closed and rigid, it got me this spot. Maybe it did, but like for you to grow and for you to become like what you really should be becoming and have that kind of like fulfilling life, like it's just gonna not lead that way. Like um and isn't that kind of like what meditation is? Is to try to make your mindset into a more an open and curious mindset. Because like when you are meditating and like you kind of get rid of all that fear or that doubt, and you find kind of see it, and it kind of like ends up dissipating a little bit, then it leaves you in this more like open mindset, and that's where creation happens. That's where
Mm.
creativity, that's where opportunity, all those things can actually flourish like through that mindset. So like I really do love that. And I couldn't imagine just like with your life, like how many times you traveled all over and how many city or countries you lived in and how many times you're looking at your visa ending. Like when uncertainty happens, like your whole life has been like uncertainty, it seems like, right? So like I can just,
Yeah, but I think everybody probably can relate to
oh
that.
yeah.
And, if you think a challenge, like you haven't been challenged yet, then it's coming. Like, there's just not people who don't suffer, or people who don't have uncertainty or don't feel lost. Like, we're also connected by these fundamental human, nature questions, but also experiences that, I think it's really important to kind of recenter ourselves in terms of, like, this isn't the only thing that's happened to me. Like, we've had generations of probably worse types of, experiences like this, but how do we move the needle?
100%. Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. All right, before we end, so like you did mention your veg gnostic. Like you have a page on Instagram, which I love. You're always sharing like cool like plant-based foods and stuff. Maybe tell everybody about like a little bit about that, why you got into that.
Yeah, so it probably goes back to that kind of principle of stacking. But when I was kind of like, when I realized, okay, academia is not for me, and I do want to make a move, and, waiting for that idea to come of like what it's supposed to be. Vegnostic was something, actually, even earlier. It was probably in Vancouver right before I left. And that I started to think, I've been vegetarian vegan for, I think, almost 22 years. Like, and that's just been nobody in my family was. I was 13 when I decided to do it, and everyone was like, what? In Calgary, of course. Like, they
Yeah.
didn't even know what the word meant.
Yeah. So it's like,
Vegetarian.
son, do you want a well done steak? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, basically. And so, you know, I guess always being an outsider, but people having curiosity, but often a lot of judgment, like, well, I couldn't do that. And I'm like, it was such a curious behavior, because it was like, I never, asked, or, I don't care what you eat. Like, it was just a really interesting experience through so many different groups. Where I found that, again, if I kind of led with more like, I'm vegan or I'm vegetarian, but, got a few pounds to lose, or, oh, I have my guilty habits, or, I travel around the world, so I'm clearly not, a saint with the environment. Being able to actually self kind of reflect and show people that it's like it's not a perfection kind of status. So, whereas maybe there is a bit of a truth to some people like really preaching it like that. So I wanted to make it something very accessible that people could, eat plant-based foods, try things out, and, not be so kind of threatened or feel like they're going to get into debate with someone to just simply try, a dish. So yeah, that was kind of agnostic of cooking for friends, but also showing them how you could build it in. So, when people are like, oh, I don't know how to cook vegan, you're like, well, let's take that spaghetti and let's like deconstruct it because at the end of the day, it's really not that complicated. It's just a little bit of, forward thinking for the most part. So we create buildable recipes and doing some work with HelloFresh over the COVID, which is also, quite nice to also make sure that I'm eating well. And um, that's, I guess, part of that future goal was always looking at like, I want to eat well, I want to take good care of myself. I love cooking for people. So it naturally, especially when COVID had kind of turned to online, I'm like, well, I can't really cook for people in my home anymore. So I can cook online and, connect with people that way. So
Oh, that's
yeah, that was Veganistic.
that's so cool. So what's if like you're bringing over someone who hasn't had like a vegan meal before, what's their go-to meal you like to cook for them?
Well, that's part of, I guess, the legacy of Veganistic. I can scroll through my Instagram page and be like, "What do you want?" And usually people are really excited. They're like, "Oh, can I do, this um, mushroom steak with biscuits, or there's some soca stuff I do with tofu scramble." It really depends on what they like, but
Damn.
yeah, that helps me have a menu ready for them.
Yeah, that is awesome. Some mushroom steak. That sounds all right. Oh man, thank you so much, Jillian. This was amazing. So yeah, tell people one more time where you want them to get a hold of you. Any places they want you want them to follow, and about your crowdfunding coming up.
Yeah, great. So our crowdfunding will be all over our social media. So just follow us. We're on Safe in the City if you're interested in that on all channels. So it's at Safe in the City on Twitter or Instagram, same with Facebook. Vegnostic is just at Vegnostic if you're looking at some food. And then my coaching stuff is on Jillian Kowalchuk. And yeah, if you're interested to pledge, then please do. We'll be live at the end of September. So stay tuned to more videos and content and updates on what we're doing with the tech.
Nice. All right, awesome. Thanks so much for joining me, Jillian.
Thank you, Nor.